Hello, my lovely FECers. And this, believe it or not, is Front End Chatter number 208 in a long-running series with, believe it or not, him,
Martin Fitz-Gibbons, and extraordinarily as it may seem, him,
Simon Hargreaves. I actually had that written the right way round.
Oh, very good.
But I just said it the wrong way round.
Yeah, never mind.
Anyway.
We'll get it on the 209th.
Fucking hell. I actually wrote it. Anyway, breaking actual news. A 200-year-old bottle of urine has been discovered on a building site in Cleethorpes. The builders who found the bottle initially thought it contained rum and were planning to drink it. But the site manager recognised it was very old and he sent it off to the University of Lincoln for analysis, where it was dated to around 1800. And its contents revealed to be, in fact, piss.
No way.
Historians have speculated the bottle may have been buried to ward off evil spirits or bad luck, or by a local sailor to ensure safe passage. Meanwhile, locals today have started a campaign to rename Cleethorpes Weethorpes.
Hey!
And one said, I've heard of a message in the bottle, but this is taking the piss. So that got me thinking, if you were to bury a motorcycling time capsule for future generations to discover, what would you put in it? And you're not allowed to fit a whole bike in.
Okay, not a whole bike.
No.
How many years in the future am I hoping this gets dug up?
Well, it's a good question.
Because the Blue Peter garden time capsules, there's a reference for international viewers, were what? Decades, I guess?
It didn't seem to be that
30 years,
long,
50
years? Yeah,
years?
something like that. Although, have any been dug up? They must have dug a few up by now. God, I don't know. But anyway, what would you put in yours?
What would I put in? Something to do with motorcycling to tell future generations what motorcycling was like in the year 2025.
While you're thinking,
Go on.
if it was 1996,
Oh, yeah.
I would put in a used knee slider, leather. I put in a sheet of Troy Lee decals, of course.
Totally different from 2025, but yeah.
I'd put in a dynograph of a 600cc sports bike group test. I'd put an iridium visor in there.
You can still get them.
I've got a cloth badge that says BMWs are for old farts. I'd put that in there. I'd put a used crash bung.
Right.
Probably a micron end can with no baffles.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
And, of course, a copy of October 1996 Performance Bikes magazine, the high watermark of motorcycle media. It was peak 1990s.
Why so? Why October 1996? What was the...
Because that's my favourite issue.
Oh, okay, very good.
I was the acting editor, and it had... we had one of the 48-hour frenzies at Cadwell, 15,000 people.
Bloody hell.
Up. The Blackbird was launched at Paul Ricard.
Wow.
Group test of the 4 best-selling sports bikes of the year. Fireblade, GSXR 750 S-Rad, name the last two, 96.
In the actual year of 1996? I mean, you guess there's CBR 600, there'd be a Thundercat, there'd be a GSXR 600, there'd be a ZX6.
That's the one.
Okay.
GSXR one. And yeah, loads of other stuff. So anyway, that's what I'd put in my.
But you're
1996
building a time capsule from 30 years ago
for opening now. God,
Yeah.
how cool would it though to be opening it now?
Well, that would really mess historians up when they start carbon dating it and realise that the bloke in 2025 just his entire life was set 30 years previous.
Oh, nostalgia! It's going to kill motorcycling, isn't it?
Not as well as it used to, though.
All right, so here's what I'd put in today. No idea. I would put in a quad lock.
Oh, okay, yeah.
A Cardo intercom.
Right, a peak.
I thought about that. And I'd try and squeeze a top box in there. Some slippers and a pipe, probably. Maybe, I don't know if you could put an app in there with all the electric charging points in the country, something like that, you know, future-proof it a bit. An app of Google Maps.
Nice.
I couldn't think of anything else. But that's the point. I couldn't think of anything that kind of...
Physical things.
That actually defines, like the way I can kind of think back to different eras and define what those things are.
A piece of Gore-Tex.
Yeah, what have you got? Have you got anything?
Well, I started thinking about time capsules. I started thinking like, well, what of my motorcycling life do I want to preserve for future generations? Like, what if my son, you know, when he gets old enough to ride, was like, oh, what was motorcycling like in your day, Dad? And you're like, right, don't worry, I've already prepared for this.
Come out into the garden, son. I've got a spade.
Get a spade. This is not about the cat.
Harsh.
Oh, wrong box. So I was thinking, what are the physical things that I kind of value in my motorcycling? And yeah, magazines I started with, motorcycle magazines. And I started going all the way back to specifically the September 2004, October 2005, August 2009, October 2010, August 2011, April 2012, and August 2013 issues of Bike, as well as the August 1997 issue of Superbike.
Oh, wow. Oh, you can't leave it there then. I can guess the Superbike one. That'll be. Is that where Shane Byrne got his kecks off or something like that?
He was Fast Bikes, dear boy.
Oh, Superbike. Sorry, right. Yeah.
Oh. I've actually put a pair of Sparky Whiz knee sliders as well.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
And then I started thinking about DVDs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because I think, although you could argue that the current multimedia landscape of motorcycling means that every nanosecond any motorcyclist ever rides a bike anywhere is permanently recorded in 4K 360. Oh, I'm going to the shops with my 4K 360. Oh, I've just ridden on a motorway with my 4K 360. Back in the day, when someone pulled a video camera out on a motorbike, it was for something important and it meant something and it mattered.
Yeah.
So I'd have the Fast Bikes How to Pull Wheelies and Influence People DVD.
Okay.
Still amazing thing to watch.
Is that the one where Shaky Byrne gets his kecks off?
Probably.
Yes, good,
yes.
Right. They have to be there somewhere.
TT, a film documentary, the 2003 one, not the Guy Martin one. Faster, not the Rock one, but the Ewan McGregor one. The 2008 250cc Duke video season review.
Oh, okay.
Simoncelli's title-winning season is an amazing up and down roller coaster of a season. Probably the 2008 Northwest 200 Duke DVD as well, the one with Michael Dunlop winning the 250s.
Oh yeah.
That's still the most speechless leaving motorcycling sporting moment I think I've seen.
That's really interesting because he's had two of them now. When you think about last year's TT.
Yeah.
Two. I mean, I filled up watching that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I watched I'm definitely sure I didn't watch the 2008 race live.
No, but I've watched it part since and you go, that's a moment that needs to be recorded for future generations.
Still makes me fill up. Yep. Wow.
Some books.
Oh,
Might
God.
have some books.
How big is this?
And then
time
I probably
capsule?
have 5 litres of petrol with some fuel stabiliser in it.
Very good. Very good. What books would you put in there?
Michael Scott's Wayne Rainey biography and
that is good.
the description about Rainey spending his whole life, his whole career, building towards winning that world championship, sacrificing everything, torturing all the people around him, putting his body through hell, focusing everything, finally crossing the line, becoming world champion and feeling nothing.
Yep, absolute blank.
Oh, shivers down your spine.
Yeah, that is a good
Amazing.
one. Oh.
Yeah, physical objects though, I guess, to represent motorcycling today or to be what matters to you in motorcycling. Because
well, maybe that's why I struggled. I don't know. I couldn't think of it like those iconic items. You know, I mean, you've reeled off a list there. A lot of yours are fairly nostalgic as well. To be fair,
of course they are, because we are past the point of no return. Are there few more miles ahead of us or behind us?
I urge you, listeners, to email anything at frontendchatter.com and send us your
biking
time capsules.
What would you bury in the garden now for future generations to dig up, and how much of it will be declared toxic?
I tell you what I would put in there.
Go on.
My time capsule, I'd put an invitation to get your bike insurance from Bennetts.
Oh.
Supporters of Front End Chatter since 1894. Britain's best bike insurers. Yes, you know the drill. Massive range of savings and offers and all sorts of kit and caboodle, plus lots of cool policy add-ons like 90 days EU cover as standard. How about that? Common mods like road legal exhaust covered as standard. How about that? And of course, you get free Bike Social membership, which you can also buy for £60 regardless of your insurer, which gives you access to all the above savings and plus VIP experiences, cheap track days. The list goes on. And don't forget to visit bikesocial.co.uk and their YouTube channel for all your media consumption needs. And I'll tell you one more thing that I'll put in my biking time capsule.
Please.
Details for the FEC Highland Fling 2.
The what?
The Highland Fling 2.
But I haven't even eaten my Highland Fling 1 yet.
Well, somebody's eaten it and they're stuffed, so we had to get another one.
So, 2025, FEC is going on tour. We had planned to do just 2 tours of Scotland this year. The Highland Fling to kick things off in May, and then the Festival to round the year off in September/October. We announced them, and they're both sold out.
Ooh.
which is brilliant. So thank you so very much. And if you're coming to either of those, we look forward to seeing you there. But unfortunately, you guys were so enthusiastic and so in demand that we had to do something a bit bonkers and a bit crazy. We've had to double up on the Highland Fling tour. And so we've created Fling 2 to accommodate many of the enthusiastic FECers who want to come up to Scotland with us in May.
It's like Oasis. We've added extra dates.
Added extra dates due to demand.
Yeah.
So after our fabulous and organised tour partners, MCI Tours, finally got in touch with the hotel and said, can we have every room you have for like 10 days, pretty much booked solid? And once we'd shuffled out the people who can come, the people who can't come, but the people who do want to come, but the people who can't come, but they might want to come, but they're not able to come on those days, we are finally down to a grand total of about six rooms left on Highland Fling 2. So a quick recap is that this is Tuesday the 6th of May to Saturday the 10th of May. The location is the Aultguish Inn in Garve, either way, way up in the Highlands, which will be our base for the thick end of a week. You'll arrive on the Tuesday, and then on the Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, we've got 3 epic riding days, personally curated by this man here, Simon Hargreaves.
This is Scotland's greatest hits. We're spending riding time up on the very north coast. We're taking in the best bit of the NC 500. We'll be going over to the west coast with the Bilach na Bar of legend. And of course, we're dipping into the Cairngorms as well. There's an awful lot of riding. It's an awful lot of fun. There's a fair bit of drinking in the evening. I'm going to have to ring the hotel and just double check that they're stocked up for that. And there's a podcast right at the end of it. It's going to be a really, really cool event.
It is going to be mega.
Mufka, where can we find details?
You can find details by going to www. No, you don't have to. You don't even have to do the W's anymore because I've saved your W finger by creating a bit.ly. So you go to bit.ly/FECFling2. So for the hard of hearing or hard of thinking, that's bit.ly/FECFLING and the number 2. FECFling 2. And that should take you to the mcitours.com booking page for Highland Fling 2, the sequel. This time it's personal.
There's a whole bunch of info on there. But so if anyone's got questions or queries about the route, the fuel stops, riding conditions, kit advice, anything to do with the weather, send your questions to anything@frontendchatter.com. If you've got questions about admin, the hotel, hiring bikes,
booking bikes,
all that kind of stuff, please email Paul at MCI Tours. That's info@mcitours.com. And can't wait to see you up there. It's going to be awesome.
And like we said, there are literally just 6 rooms left. As we record this, we have heard of 2 people who might want to go, so there might just be down to 4 rooms left. So this is your very last chance to book a room. Do it now. You will not regret it.
Well, do you know what we could do? Me and you could sleep in a tent.
We could, or sublet our rooms.
Yes, yeah.
Or share them with some willing FECers. There's a Highland Fling you didn't bargain on.
Let's not go down that road. Right. What's been happening in the world of motorcycling?
Well, seeing as last episode we spent in the dim and distant past of 20 years ago, and seeing as you've kicked off this episode with something from 30 years ago, how about we talk about what's happening in motorcycling today?
Right now. Okay.
May I kick off?
Not much there, is there?
Well, there isn't.
I've got a big blank screen in front of me.
Is it like these pages left blank for your notes? This page left blank for Mufka to waffle about numbers for a bit.
Parentheses, Mufka talk now.
Oh, well, I'm glad you left a Mufka talk now. Can I run you through some extremely exciting state of the motorcycling world today?
Oh, yes, please. That actually sounds interesting.
Lovely stuff. According to BMW Motorrad has just had their biggest year ever, having sold 210,408 bikes in 2024.
They say that every year.
Now, if that sounds familiar, and that's because, and I've just looked this up, they've also declared all-time sales records in 2023, 2022, 2021, 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015, 2014, 2013, 2012, and 2011.
They're doing all right then, aren't they?
In fact, to put their consistent long-term growth into some kind of context, in 2024, they doubled their sales from 2011, which was itself an all-time sales record.
Oh, flipping heck.
So just 13 years ago, they were barely doing 100,000 bikes, and now they're well over 200,000. That is astonishing. Now, I've tried digging into the numbers as best as I can, and it does reveal that while sales are up, they are only up by a tiny amount, about 0.5%. So, in essence, they're flat.
Right.
So then you start going, oh, well, if they're doing really well in some places, why are they not doing so well somewhere else? So it turns out they're up in Europe, which remains their biggest market, and specifically they're up in Germany, Italy, and Spain, all good markets.
Yeah.
They're up in Brazil too, to the point that Brazil is now bigger than many European markets.
Is it?
And knocking on the door of rivaling the USA for sheer volume.
Ooh.
The only obvious low light in their sales figures is China.
Oh.
Where they're down more than 10% in 1 year.
Oh.
This is a common story among all sorts of European and Western automotive manufacturers who all of a sudden have noticed their China sales taking a dive.
Oh, okay. Wonder what that's down to.
I think it's the Chinese economy itself.
It's in recession, isn't it, I think?
Well, it's sort of a strange mix of it's doing unbelievably well and yet people don't want to buy a load of expensive Western automotive products. But
yes, if you want to find out what the Chinese economy's doing, don't go.
Don't ask me.
Don't ask the Chinese. Ask people who sell things into the economy. Yeah.
And also, while BMW's global press release doesn't mention the UK, funnily enough, the MCIA's new registration figures gives us an idea that they're actually down a smidge over here, around 1.5%.
Okay.
So BMW kind of holding steady, let down on the global stage by China and the UK.
No.
Entschuldigung, Sie bitte. Ducati, meanwhile, quietly squeezed out a press release covering their 2024 performance, which finished 6% down on 2023.
Okay.
Ducati say there are global complexities and uncertainties and logistical issues. They had good news in Spain, Italy, and South America, and not so good news in the USA, down 14%, Germany down a smidge, and China down a whopping 26% in 1 year.
Ooh, that is revealing.
Again, no mention of the UK specifically.
Now, I remember, do you remember when the V2 was launched, the Multistrada V2, a couple of years ago? And there was a specific reason for them. The bike, the chassis and the engine was almost identical to the previous model, but what they'd done was change the riding position and made the seat loads lower. And the specific reason for that was to enable them to sell the bike into East Asian markets because of the physiological differences in the two body types, which is interesting now that so obviously they considered, I remember thinking at the time, in fact, I remember asking one of the Ducati guys, is China that important to you as a market? And they were like, it's massive. Yeah. In fact, I think the current boss at Ducati UK, his previous position was in China as well. So yeah, it's a big. So what did he do wrong? So it's a big, it's a big chunk for them. So that's significant.
It's a really big chunk. I mean, just for a bit of scale, because I could look at the BMW figures. I think BMW sold something like 9,000-ish bikes in Britain, and about 14,000-ish bikes in China.
Yeah.
So even on a volume level, China's buying way more bikes than us Brits are. And we would like to think of ourselves as like a fairly important market for BMW, for Europe, prestigious European brands.
Well, we're not that important to BMW. They didn't even put us on the list. Okay, well, that's interesting.
Pop quiz.
Well, hang on, there is one more thing about Ducati.
Yep.
Traditionally, back in the good old days, Ducati's kind of business model was perceived, in this country anyway, as being them relying on a halo model every year. You'd get, like, it would be the Multistrada, and then the next year it's the V thingy, the what's it called, 959, and then the next year, so they kind of, or the Diavel, and they'd sort of go along in this kind of sine wave of like, significant model means we're going to do well, and we've got to have another one for the start of next year. Did they have my brain's a complete fug, but did they have anything last year? Was it like a kind of a flat year for Ducati in terms of models?
It's interesting. I can't think what their big bike last year was.
Because the Monster was like year before, 2 years before that.
When you look at what's actually new or updated for 25, it's pretty much everything, because they're doing all of their Euro 5 Pluses now.
Okay.
So there's a new Multistrada V4, there's a new Panigale, there's the new 890, there's all sorts of new stuff.
Yeah, the 890 is like going to be a significant thing, isn't it, with the Multistrada? The Multistrada is the first version of that engine that anyone's going to ride, isn't it, I think?
Is it?
I think so. Nothing else has come out with that yet, has it?
They've announced the Panigale V2, they've announced the Street Fighter V2, they've announced a Multistrada V2.
Yeah, I think the Multistrada is the first one to be ridden. That'd be interesting. Cool. Okay, sorry,
speaking of that, it's a good question. So what was their kind of big selling thing? Well, I was surprised because anecdotally, I always remember the story being that it was the Monster that was the volume seller for Ducati. Do you remember hearing this?
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, they might well be selling 916s and 996s and 998s and 909s, but it's the monster that keeps them in business.
It was always the strapline of a magazine in the 1990s.
Yeah, any road test.
Yeah, the bike that saved Ducati.
So guess what is the biggest selling bike globally, remember? Globally, so we're including China and Brazil and we're including all markets all around the world. Which model in Ducati's range sold the most last year?
I've got to say Monster.
It's not the Monster.
Oh, good. What is it?
But it's one of those sports bikes, isn't it, Si? With all of their MotoGP success and World Superbike success. Oh, no. Sorry, don't mention World Superbikes. That wasn't. But anyway, it's going to be one of those Paniglies, isn't it?
Isn't it? Okay.
No.
Oh, it's not a Panigli. It's not a Monster.
It's not a Scrambler, you know.
Not a Scrambler?
Make the entry-level affordable bit for all the cool young people who's going to get on a Scrambler this year.
I'm running out of Ducatis now. What else is there?
Biggest selling bike globally for Ducati last year, Multistrada V4.
Was it really?
Yeah, or Multistrada V4, certainly. Over 10,000 Multistrada V4s sold and over 13,000 Multistradas in total. Second biggest Panigale, third biggest Monster.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So you want to know how motorcycling as a whole, as a planet, has changed? The sportiest Italian brand there is sells adventure bikes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that concludes my TED Talk.
Wow.
No, there is one more. Triumph. This news comes from a website called motorcyclesdata.com. I can't see a source, so you have to take it with a pinch of salt, but it looks fairly credible. They claim Triumph sold 133,677 bikes in 2024.
Blimmin' heck.
Bloomin' heck indeed. Up more than 33% in a year. And that they've doubled their sales volumes in 5 years.
Wow.
Remember, 5 years ago was a bit COVID-y.
Yeah,
but
okay.
Nonetheless.
Let's pick a year that was really bad and let's double that.
And let's pick it against a year that was really good. So obviously, in no small part, down to the introduction of the 400 Speed and Scrambler, which this article reported sold 54,000 bikes that year, or roughly 40% of Triumph's overall sales volume.
No way, really?
Far be it from me to be a clever dick, but if a new product represents 40% of your sales and your sales are up 33%, what does that mean about the sales of your not-so-new products?
Yeah.
Well, if these figures are right, then without the 400s, they would have sold around about 80,000 bikes.
Yeah.
In the financial year to June 2023, the last figures available pre-400s, Triumph sold 88,607 bikes. So we are kind of comparing apples with oranges, but that might suggest that if you pull the 400s out, Triumph's sales are actually down around 10% in their big bike sales.
That's interesting because that does, I mean, again, that sort of anecdotal evidence that we see in front of our own noses, that Triumph, you know, you look at some of their range and some of the discounts they're offering, those things like the Tiger 1200s are not flying off the shelves.
There's a lot of offers. I don't know Triumph discounts. I haven't seen Triumph discounts. I've seen a lot of offers. I've seen a lot of we'll put some panniers on that and we'll offer some finance on that and you can have an accessory pack on that. But,
yes, please ride it away, sir.
So I think, why do I bring this all up? I bring this up because I think the BMW, Ducati and Triumph are the three kind of biggest European posh premier brands, not including the one who's currently going through the restructuring process at the minute. And the one who we did cover, their sales were down 25% to the midpoint of 2024. And I remember you saying something to the effect of like, but do we have some sales figures to kind of put up next to them to add a bit of context? Well, is everyone down? Because KTM give the reason for their apocalyptic financial status as being due to kind of global events, and they're being down to interest rates being high for everyone, and inflation, and cost of living, and people not having the money, and kind of not acknowledging, at least not publicly, that it might be something specific to KTM. Well, BMW being broadly flat, Ducati being down 6%, and Triumph being either up or down, depending on how you count the numbers, it does suggest, I'm afraid, that it is something peculiar to KTM.
Yeah. Or more exaggerated with KTM. There is a slowdown in the market, but they got sort of caught more sharply than everybody else. Interesting. Okay.
So, moving on from the sales figures, but we can still keep talking about BMW and KTM at least, because we have the most niche new bike news you will ever hear. I'm going to try and get this whole thing done in 5 minutes, because these are such obscure new bike news. But we have to at least acknowledge what has gone on since last we fed.
Acknowledge away.
BMW spent the past week teasing a new big boxer announcement. Now, I assumed this would be a relation of their 2000cc R20 concept, but it turned out no. It was a lightly updated R18 range, now with a Euro 5 Plus motor, no drop in power, a small increase in torque, and some different wheel sizes.
Well, hey!
There's also tweaked suspension and styling, a plusher, more comfortable seat for the elderly posteriors that are about to inhabit them. I don't think it's any secret that the R18 hasn't been a big seller for BMW. On the whole, I can't see anything in these updates that's going to change anything about that. But, you know, nice that an air-cooled 1800cc twin carries on into the Euro 5 Plus era. And nice they didn't choose to just shit-can the whole range, which, you know,
They probably should have done.
might have done.
Yeah. I must admit, I've not ridden. Have you ridden one?
I briefly rode a 100th anniversary out in Germany while on a BMW trip.
Okay.
Not my cup of tea.
Yeah, I've heard planes passing by. I've heard that.
Or an R18 just on idle.
Oh, very good. Yeah. No, I've heard that there's kind of like the engine is wonderful, but the chassis and the riding position, the ergonomics of the thing, are completely impractical.
Yeah.
I've got no idea.
one of those
I've got
big
no
bikes,
idea.
but
There are
without
like how many versions? There's like 5 versions of them or something.
Yeah, I think there's a standard and a retro and a bagger and a...
Is there something called the Rock R18 Rock? Is there Rock tank?
Probably, yeah.
Ridiculous things.
Yeah. Speaking of playing with wheel sizes, Livewire announced a third version of their excellent S2 electric roadster, following in the footsteps of the Delmar Street Tracker, the Mulholland Cruiser. We now have the S2 Alpinista. Alpinista?
Alpine Star?
Alpine Star, yeah, maybe. A bike that's teased with the romantic images of group riders slicing silently along gorgeous twisty mountain roads, bikes loaded with panniers and tall screens, and it turns out to just be a Delmar with 17-inch wheels.
Oh,
same battery, same charging ability, same 17-gram price point, and all the touring bits and the promo stuff turn out to be accessories.
Oh, great. Okay. Good. Anything? I can't.
Far more affordable.
Thank you.
Are KTM's 125 and 390, Supermotos and Enduros. Although the Enduros, confusingly, are called Enduros, but they're listed under a new dual sport category of KTM's website rather than the Enduro section of KTM's website, so that you don't confuse these new Enduro models with their actual Enduro models.
Clear as mud. Clear as off-road
That makes
mud.
sense.
Yeah, no, not at all.
It's sort of slightly tricky to know what to make of these. I think they're kind of a spiritual descendant or relative of the 390 Adventure, which had a bit of a mixed reception. These now have a 399cc engine, so slightly bigger, a new frame and subframe, what looks to be more off-road capable chassis components, including 21 and 18-inch wheels and long travel adjustable 230mm suspension. So they do look to have more off-road ability. The downside is that they also look quite heavy.
Okay.
Claimed weight for the 390 Enduro is 159 kilos without fuel. So given a 9-litre fuel tank, that works out to around 166 curb.
Sounds light to me.
Look who's talking, fat boy. But that compares to Honda's CRF 300, 142 kilos curb, or the new Suzuki DRZ 4S, 151 kilos curb.
Yeah.
So it is a bit chunky. On the plus side, it looks competitively priced. KTM UK has announced it will be 5,699 on the road, which already undercuts last year's CRF 300L, 5,829, and will absolutely certainly undercut Suzuki's DRZ4S, even though pricing for that hasn't been announced yet. KTM say this bike, or the bikes, will land in showrooms in March, and given I'm assuming these will be built by Bajaj and therefore not be affected by the production shutdown in Mattighofen, which is expected to last until March, that sounds plausible.
Yeah.
Hopefully details on the 390 Adventure R are just around the corner.
Following soon. Goodly stuff.
And last, but
there's more.
certainly least,
Okay.
Suzuki.
Okay. Oh, now I'm raising my eyebrows. What are they up to?
Suzuki has come good on its previous commitment to introduce an electric two-wheeler in the 2024 financial year.
Okay.
By announcing the new e-Address.
What's that then?
It's a scooter launched at a motorcycle show in New Delhi. It's a fairly generic-looking functional commuter scooter, and the specs are even more modest than its styling, with 5.5 horsepower.
Okay.
Fed by a 3-kilowatt non-removable battery that's good for a claimed, get this in your touring, 54 miles. Why are they launching it? Because the Indian market for electric two-wheelers is absolutely flourishing. Well over 1 million new electric bikes sold last year, making it the second biggest global market for electric two-wheelers behind China.
Oh, okay.
The good news is that it means Suzuki is taking a step into electrification. It's the last of the 4 Japanese brands to do so, and it's always felt the most reluctant, but it has done it. And it seems like, although they're launching it in India to, I guess, will be the prime market for it, word coming from Suzuki GB suggests that a version of the e-address could be introduced into the European market this year. Now, they don't have to do that, but maybe it suggests that they want to.
Yeah.
They think there could be some kind of burgeoning appetite for it. I think the pros will be that it will be cheap. It certainly doesn't look like let's be brutal, a high investment model.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that they've gone with LFP battery chemistry, lithium ferrous phosphate, I think it is, rather than NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt. So it's still a lithium battery, but it uses different materials in the cathode. It will have worse energy density than existing lithium batteries, but they're generally regarded to be safer, have a longer cycle life, and a lower impact environmentally, ethically, and financially because they don't use cobalt.
Good.
So there we go.
Good on you, Suzuki.
Good on you, Suzuki.
But of course, you know, with recent events, we can forget about all these electric bikes now, can't we? Because the whole. I mean, when was the last time you heard anyone talk about getting rid of petrol engines by 2035? Is that still a thing, or is that kind of sort of going a bit quiet really recently?
Oh, what for bikes in the UK?
Yeah.
So yeah, where are we with that? where are we with that? I think there was I've forgotten now. There was a proposal, and I think that proposal's been kind of quietly forgotten. Consultation, that's the word I'm looking for. There was a consultation about it, and the result was submitted to the previous government, and the current government's gone, you're a bit busy at the minute.
Yeah.
Got other stuff to be doing.
Yeah.
Forget your motorbikes.
Forget bikes. Bikes are not so important.
Yeah.
And petrol, what's the point? Yes, I don't know. Good, right. Yeah, it has been a bit quiet for new bikes lately. Everyone's out doing all these launches, aren't these new bike rides?
A bit of jealousy.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, Joe.
Oh,
yeah. I want to be out there.
What would you most like to be out riding at the minute then, Si? Go on, pick a favourite.
Tiger 800 Sport. Apparently that's being launched at some
fairly
point.
soon.
Yeah.
If not now. I don't know.
The Hornet, I'd like to have ridden that. That would have been good. NT 1100, I'd like to have ridden that. That would have been interesting.
Yep.
With its semi-active. I'll tell you what, can you just pull that door to behind you there, mate? Is that
Why
right?
have we got a door open in winter?
Yeah, I know, it's mad. There we go. Thank you. That will shut those planes up. It's those bloody tornadoes, whatever it is, from Coningsby.
Oh, is it?
Flying around. Eurofighters, whatever they're called. Typhoons?
Lovely.
I don't know. Typhoon, tornado, cyclones? I don't know what
It's
they
all
are.
the same to me.
Yeah, bring back the hurricane.
Bring back the Spitfire.
That's not a wind.
If anyone knew what the range of a Spitfire is, it's pretty modest. I think they could fly for like half an hour. How am I supposed to go touring in that? It's not enough for me.
Oh dear. Right, good. So anyway, that's the end of new bikes and all the rest of it. What
Can
else
I
have we
go
got?
from frivolous to slightly serious?
Okay, what worthy? We're going down the worthy road.
Yeah.
Treading down that road.
Do you mind very delicately?
I don't mind. I've just got to put my stout walking boots on, you know.
Start your upper lip.
To tread down that road.
I'd like to talk to you about a petition.
Okay.
British motorcycling seems to be run on and inundated by petitions. But here's one that I recommend you pay attention to. Motorcycle safety kit expert Paul Varnsbury, a man who's helped me personally and professionally understand the topic of safety kit when I was at Ride Magazine, when I was at Sports Bike Shop, and now as a freelancer, has started a petition called Implement a Strategy to Protect Motorcyclists from Imports of Unsafe Clothing.
Catchy.
Snappy title, Paul. In a sentence, the purpose of the petition is that we want the government to implement a national strategy that protects motorcyclists from imports of unsafe clothing. Why is this important? Because all motorcycle clothing on sale in the UK today has to, by law, be tested and certified. But despite this, there is a booming market in online sales, often through social media, of illegal, untested, uncertified clothing, typically shipped from an overseas factory direct to the consumer, thereby bypassing any legitimate UK retailer. And it seems nothing is being done to combat this. It seems little is being done by the social media sites, and even less is being done at a kind of national legal level to prevent it. Now, Paul, who I interviewed for a piece in the most recent issue of Bike Magazine, described this to me as, quote, the single biggest issue affecting motorcycle kit in the UK today. So, look, you might think, who on earth would buy a pair of gloves from a brand they'd never heard of off of a Facebook post? Or who on earth would buy a set of leathers?
I was going to ask what the number. I mean, do we get numbers? Do we know how many people are doing this thing and buying this stuff?
No, I don't have any sense of scale for it, but I guess your hackneyed answer would be even one is too many. So.
Yeah, and also it's not hard to figure out, is it? Because, I mean, if you think of what you do with other products in other parts of your life, it's straight onto Amazon or eBay and find something cheap.
Yeah. Or even you might be casually browsing Facebook to find photos of your, I don't know, friend's holiday or whatever, and then you get served an advert for a set of gloves that are really cheap or a new one-piece leathers.
Yeah.
And they offer all these things and they make claims, but it's not tested or proven.
And the other thing is, we are talking, because us now are talking to a pretty sort of mature motorcycling audience in the sense that we kind of have a good grasp of what's right and what's wrong and what stuff we should wear and what we shouldn't wear. But there must be a huge number of motorcyclists out there who aren't sort of linked in to that sort of, I don't know, that different world.
They might be new. They might have been riding 5 years.
Yeah.
And not know one brand from another, or not know that these legal rules, not even like suggestions, but legal obligations and legal rules exist.
Yeah.
So this might not be for you, but please consider signing it because it might help someone else or prevent another motorcyclist from spending their money on something that is illegal and could harm them or lead to a lack of protection in an incident. So if you could kindly, if you're a UK citizen, direct a browser to bit.ly/stopbadkit. I have done this. I have signed. It doesn't take very long. You need to put your details in. They'll send you a link to your email. You click that and it proves that it's a thing. You're a real person. And if this petition gets to, I think it's 10,000 signatures, the government has to at least respond to it. Even if they respond to it but just by saying, go away. But at least it will be some acknowledgement that this thing needs to change. This thing needs to happen. So please do.
Yeah, it's not a great imposition of your time
it's not.
or your effort, is it, to do it?
No, it will. If it leads to something, if it leads to some government knowledge, or even better if it leads to some government action, it will make British motorcycling a better place.
Yeah, I was thinking about, if there's anything else that people can do. Is there any other mechanism by which we can sort of educate? Because it's about education, I guess, isn't it?
I think so.
Letting people know what there is out there and why it's not a good idea to buy it. I suppose the other reason is a lot of people will buy stuff thinking, well, I'm not going to fall off.
Yeah. Yeah. Or that kind of old school mentality. I don't even know if it is necessarily just younger riders or newer riders or less experienced. There might be plenty, the same humans who'd happily go and root through a bin at a show, root through a discount. I don't mean an actual bin. I
know what you mean.
Not through burger wrappers and
skip the kin.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, we're going root through the bargain basement bin at an old show and you pick out something and you go, well, it's only 15 quid or whatever. It'll be better than nothing.
Yeah.
It's
not necessarily.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah. Fair play. Cool.
So anyway, that's the end of the worthiness. That ends there.
Good.
We've done Highland Fling. We've done new bikes nobody cares about.
Brilliant.
We've done sales figures.
Oh.
I'm all out of action.
We're rocking. Should we dive into the FEC, Zach?
Please. There'll be far more sense in there.
And there's some really, really good emails.
There are. Where are you going to start?
Should we start with Tony Wood?
Oh, lovely stuff.
Tony Wood says, hi guys, I've just been listening to FEC 199. I'm a bit behind because my podcast platform has recently found FECs 1 to 20, which were missing when I originally listened to the FEC back catalogue. That must have been confusing, starting at episode 21. It's confusing listening at any point, really.
I think I did flick a setting on the FEC machine fairly recently, which suddenly unlocked all the old ones. And I think a bunch of people got a load of notifications on their phone that suddenly went, 42 new episodes in front of us. So if you got that, I'm sorry, that was my fault. But yes, the full back catalogue should now be available. Anyway,
right.
Please continue.
Tony carries on. Anyway, bikes going automatic. I reckon it could be due to emissions. In the car world, all these double clutch autos have lower emissions than the manuals. They normally change up the gears really early too to help this. Emissions are a big deal in the UK car world for company car tax rules and overall company emissions, I think, he says. I don't think this applies to bikes, at the moment anyway, but maybe something is on the way. Just a thought. And then he goes on to say, bike I'm looking forward to riding this year is also the Tiger Sport 800. I'm a Z1000 SX owner, but coming to that from a GSX-R 1000, it can be a bit of a lump. Being your typical mid-50s British motorcyclist, it looks comfortable, will be plenty of fast enough, reasonably light, well-priced, and it looks nice, similar to the Tiger 1050, which I always liked. He goes on to say, I sat on it at the NEC and it was smaller than I expected, as I didn't know it was the same frame as the 660 at the time. I'll definitely be getting a decent test ride on it at some point in the year and looking forward to it. Keep fecking. Many thanks to Bennett's Bike Social, Tony. Cheers, Tony.
Goodness.
Yeah, I felt the same way about the 800. In fact, we both did, didn't we, at the show a little bit? I wasn't as wowed with it in the flesh as I was when I saw the pics.
Yeah, I agree. It will have pros and cons for its closeness to the Tiger Sport 660.
Yeah.
The pro will be that, I guess, it reduces the cost to develop the bike, to sell the bike, and so that's why it can be on sale for a fairly tempting price. The downsides, I guess, physically, it's going to be a little bit more compact. And I think there's just an association thing because the Tiger Sport 660 has a reputation of being quite a novice-friendly bike. Mm-hmm. That has two sides as well, doesn't it?
Rubbed off.
It can be a little bit like, if you buy this, you're going to be tarred with the brush of only being a new rider. But,
yeah.
It'd be like still owning an SV650 in your 40s, wouldn't it?
Who would be doing that?
I like Tony's point about emissions, though.
Yeah, auto transmission. We'd kind of touched on that, haven't we, in a previous FEC, I think, and we'd speculated that might have been one of the reasons. I did have a quick look, I'm sure you did too, just to compare sort of manual and DCT emissions from the NT1100.
Oh, yeah.
And it's exactly the same. The claimed emissions are exactly the same and the same claimed fuel consumption. But strangely enough, while I was looking at it, I did see some other differences. So the DCT NT1100 takes half a litre more oil.
Oh,
which I'm guessing the sump isn't any bigger, so you must just be recommended to put more oil in it.
Yeah. Does the oil go into the extra clutch?
Yeah, I mean, there must be more room more physical room for the oil to go, I suppose. It goes further. Obviously, we know it weighs 10 kilos more. But the other thing was, it's 1 decibel louder.
Is it really?
Say Honda on their website.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's that from the rider going, no!
Don't change gear now!
I did the same. I also looked up the Yamahas. Did you look at them?
I started to look at the Yamahas, but I couldn't get into the website and figure out how to do it.
It's
so I gave
not
up.
quite as intuitive as the Honda.
No.
Yeah, Tracer 9 manual and 9 GT Plus with Yamped are both coincidentally the same 116 grams per kilometre. And KTM, the manual 1390 Adventure S is 139.5 grams per kilometre, whereas the S Evo is, hang on a minute. Oh, the S Evo is actually even higher emissions at 155 grams per kilometre.
Christ, that's quite a lot higher.
Yeah, that is quite a lot higher. So that's either a typo or the suggestion that if they put a mechanically self-disengaging clutch in, that it somehow makes the emissions higher.
My suspicion is that at the moment, the way that bikes are tested, so the test program for measuring emissions probably doesn't take into account whether the bike is DCT, whether it's manual or automatic, in the sense that it might be hasn't got enough fidelity, perhaps, to spot it. Because I think, again, I'm sure it sounds wrong every time I say it, but the idea that it's back calculated from that's fuel consumption. It's back calculated from emissions. Beg your pardon, I'm off on something else now. But anyway, point being, maybe there's not enough fidelity in the measurement, or there's some other reason. They may be future proofing, so that at some point, when the emissions are measured, to take into account something that will matter with your transmission. I don't know. But
I think that's more likely that it could be something to set in motion now, something for the future. But it's certainly not because it makes the emissions lower today or because it lets them sell the bike today. Because so long as they're running it as an option, as long as you can buy both the manual version and the semi-auto version, they have to homologate it as a manual anyway. So, it could be for the future, but not for now.
Oh, and just one last thing on auto gearboxes. I was looking through some pictures the other day and I was riding an NT1100 manual, backing it into a corner, getting it really nice and sideways. And I thought, you can't do that on a fucking DCT, can you?
No, you can't.
No,
you can't.
So I hate it, and that's why.
Okay. Sensible, real-world advice from Front End Chatter. Chris Sharp, maybe? Anyway, Chris says, chaps, just wanted to write in to say how much I enjoyed your whiz through the January 2005 edition of Bike Magazine in the latest episode. Obviously, I still have my copy. Obviously, you do. So I dug it out and read along with your reminiscences. The issue was actually a mildly consequential one for me, says Chris, as I was one of the presumably very few people who bought one of the bikes featured in the very random assortment group test, not long after it was published. I headed down to see that nice Carl Rosner in Croydon, know it well, and traded in my CB500S for a second-hand Triumph Sprint RS.
Wow.
I passed my test in 2002, and this was my first proper big bike. I basically bought it because it was the cheapest way of owning and insuring something vaguely adjacent to being 1,000cc and sporty, which was, of course, what any self-respecting motorcyclist aspired towards 20 years ago. Yeah, good point. Chris says it was shonky in many ways, but that was the bike that delivered for me the moment that we all remember forever. The first time you hold the throttle wide open on something with a decent amount of power. This happened on the M25, approximately 20 minutes after I left Carl Rosner's forecourt. I remember belting around Brittany on that bike that summer and managing to run out of petrol on a Sunday morning somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I ended up pushing it for what felt like miles to the nearest petrol station, which of course wouldn't accept my UK bank card, and then having to use my rusty schoolboy French to persuade a local to pay for my fuel on theirs.
Brilliant.
Bonjour. Avez-vous any... Would it have been euros? I guess it would have been euros. Or francs.
Might have been
20
francs.
years ago? Might have been
francs.
I loved it, says Chris, despite its many shortcomings, but it was an electrical disaster area, prone to stranding me in all sorts of places. I got a lot of use out of my AA membership in those days, and eventually I exchanged it for what I really wanted, a Daytona 955. I kept that one for years. Chris says he also remembered writing a review of the RS on the then thriving uk.rec.motorcycles Usenet group. I literally have no idea what a Usenet group is.
Oh, I remember that was a big thing. It was sort of in between forums and social media.
Oh, okay.
So you used to have these kind of official forum places back in the early days. They were called dungeons. They were called multi-user dungeons. That's what they were called, where people just basically talked, like, you know, had conversations, a bit like kind of WhatsApp, I suppose. Only open to everybody. And yeah, the Usenet group was kind of this sort of like subdivision of that. It was kind of like graphics free. It was just like plain text.
Like Reddit or something.
Yeah, a bit like that. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, that's probably the nearest thing.
Weird. Speaking of UKRM, I smiled when you mentioned Bike Magazine's used bike market correspondent Neil Murray. Like your acquaintance Neil Champion, he was a prolific poster there under the moniker The Older Gentleman and a regular source of scathing wit as well as sage advice. Like so many, no longer with us, sadly. Chris says, I still subscribe to Bike Magazine all these years later, but in that period, under Tim Thompson's editorship, it was a truly great read. And it was a pleasure to revisit those times in your company and get a glimpse behind the scenes.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Well, it worked for you. I think if you didn't have a copy of Bike January 2005 to hand, or you hadn't read Bike 20 years ago, may have been a challenging listen, yes. But we'll do it again in a year's time, probably.
Probably, when we run out of content.
Yes.
Fun fact, I bought my SV650 from Carl Rosner.
Did you?
Yes, that's something you and I have in common, Chris. In fact, I bought it in 2003, so we were in the same dealership within 12 months of each other.
Wow.
Buying used bikes.
Spooky. Sliding doors or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that could have been me standing in France with a Sprint RS.
Of course, Chris, you do realise you've got something in common with Jean-Jacques Burnel from the Stranglers.
Oh.
He too has, or he did have a few years ago, a Triumph Sprint RS as well.
Really?
Yeah.
And how do you know that?
Oh, yeah. Well, Mufka.
Well, what I do is I stalk him.
I can't drop my mic because it's plugged in and I'm talking through it. But anyway, the other thing Chris talks about, what's that? You know that moment when you first open a throttle and go,
on a big bike?
Power. Can you remember your first?
Well, I guess like all of us who started climbing the ladder.
The ladder?
I remember doing it on the RS50. I remember doing it on the RS125. I remember doing it on the SV650.
Did the RS50 give you that kind of like perspective topple, that kind of speed vertigo?
Yes, it did, because I wasn't pedaling.
I remember that. Yeah, okay, all right.
And the 125, I do remember opening the throttle and going, fucking hell, how fast do these things go?
Yeah.
And then I remember on the 650, I think the first time I rode it, I overtook a caravan and just couldn't believe. But then, you know, you're going from 30 horsepower to 70. Like, that's quite a step. And then I think when I started on bike, the first bikes I would have ridden that had some proper kick to them would have been an SV1000. I borrowed Ben Miller's Rizzler painted SV1000S, and that kicked me in the pants. And I borrowed Ben Wilkins's R6 long termer and opened the throttle and the front wheel came up, and I thought that's what thousands did. What the hell is 1,000 going to feel like?
Yeah.
What was yours?
Well, I remember that first feeling on a first time I rode a motorbike and didn't have to pedal. I remember that kind of euphoria, but I knew straight away it wasn't that fast because I think downhill it probably wasn't much quicker than a push bike, to be honest.
Fair point.
So the thing that I remember, it was the RD125LC, but it wasn't mine. My mate Terry had an MTX 50 and a lad he was at college with in Medway had an RD125LC. So he let me have a go on it. Complete stranger, didn't know him from Adam. Took the TS50E up there one lunchtime, and the feeling was like so intense. You know, that was when I first got that kind of like when it hit the power band, and you go, oh my god, it's not just like cycling with no pedals. It is actually really fast. And then I remember the same feeling again on the KONS because that was like the RD only magnified. And then I got it again when I rode a Fireblade in 1992. Which was kind of, when you think about it, was like almost, was that twice the horsepower of the KONS?
Yeah, I guess
Getting on for something like that. And then again, when I rode a ZZR 1100 in 1992 as well, although that was kind of slightly different, like more faster, but that was a de-restricted one, so that was making like 130 odd horsepower or something. And then the next time was on the R1 in 98.
No way.
Yeah. It was a significant step forward. It was still another kind of mile per hour stone.
Wow.
And then the last one to do it really was the S1000RR in 2010. That was the last time. It's a bit sad, really, isn't it? That was the last time that a bike really kind of... I used to call it unimaginably fast.
Yeah.
Like, it was the rate of acceleration that you couldn't relive when you weren't doing it. So if you got off the bike and sat down, it was so intense you couldn't kind of go through it again.
I think it's that shocking hit of suddenly having an acceleration experience like you've never felt before. And they become so much more kind of vivid and starker when that power increases. Like you said, it's like doubling. You go from kind of, 5-6 horsepower to sort of 15 or so, and then to 30, and then to 60 or 70, and then to over 100. Like, these are enormous leaps forward. And then to kind of make any real progress from there, you got to be getting on for like 200 horsepower.
That's quite depressing, actually.
When was the last time you sort of doubled your horsepower?
I mean, we'd need like 250 horsepower to relive that experience
That's
again.
what we want, manufacturers. That's what we want, to feel like we're 16 again. Build us 300 horsepower bikes, please. Thank you very much.
Oh, dear. Excellent. Right, shall we thank you. Who was that? Sorry.
Chris.
Chris, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Beg your pardon.
We
Right.
want doubled our horsepower, and we want to run out of fuel in France with no access to petrol stations again. Oh, the good old days.
Right, moving on to Rob Walker. Is it my turn?
Yes.
Hello, guys, says Rob. Great podcast. Been doing my best to listen back through the episodes. Plenty of hours of entertainment on my commute. I have a 2021 Speed Twin 1200 and a Forza 350 scooter. But as useful as the scooter is in busy Cornwall, I'm thinking to chop it in. I have a busy work and family life, but I'm trying to work in more time to take longer motorcycle trips and, much as I love my Speed Twin, to get anywhere further afield than Cornwall and Devon, perhaps on a FEC tour. Says Rob, it wasn't me. I'm faced with 100 miles of the A30 to Exeter before the country starts to open up. A roads and motorways are no fun on a Speed Twin, says Rob. Zero wind protection, etc. So I'm looking at a middleweight adventure bike that would suit Cornish back roads and be good for a motorway blast to get further afield. I think my requirements are, number one, good range. The Speed Twin is only 120 miles before having to refuel. Number two, a bit of wind protection. Number three, cruise control. Number four, decent power for 70 mile an hour plus cruising. Rob says, I'm a fan of Moto Guzzi's V85 TT for its styling, etc. And it meets the above criteria, but I've also been looking at a Husqvarna Norden 901. I like the style, but also it's got a bit more power than the Guzzi. I'm not all that concerned by the current KTM situation, but, says Rob, perhaps I should be. I'm looking at a budget of around about $8,000. Any other suggestions or comments on the above? Thanks again, Rob.
Oh, Rob. Sounds like you've answered your own question. You don't really need us for this one. It's the V85 TT all the way.
Is it?
Well, I mean, look, like he says, it is a handsome looking thing. It has, what was the other criteria? Sort of easy to ride and cruise control. I think it's got it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
And it can easily do your sort of motorway cruising. It's got a lovely comfy seat. Yeah. From what I remember, the suspension's really nice and plush. You could sit on that. You could be in Exeter 1 minute. You could fall asleep and you could wake up in, I don't know, Garv,
Make it
up in Scotland, up in the Highlands.
Yeah, you could do that.
I know I haven't ridden a Dennis Norden 901, so I don't quite know that bike. I have ridden a lot of the other KTM engine things, including KTM 790, 890, CF Moto, Cove, whatever else.
Yeah,
I've ridden an awful lot of them, but I haven't ridden a Norden. But you didn't mention like wanting to bash down green lanes like your life depends on it, or do massive power wheelies or anything. So
I think if you're riding down those Cornish back lanes and you had a 901 or a V85, the 901 would be a lot more fun. It would be wheeling off the crests. And
it'd be livelier.
It would be looping around. It'd be brilliant fun.
Yeah, that's true.
And it is a good-looking bike. I don't think you...
Ooh, objectively?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Considering,
it looks a bit like a minion.
It does, actually. You're right. Yeah, fair enough. There are other bikes. There are other middleweights.
Okay.
BMW's F850 GS. Oh, look at you. But it has got cruise control, and your 800 GS didn't.
That's true.
CF Moto, you mentioned it. The 800 MT, you can get them for the $8,000.
You can, yeah. Probably a brand new one.
Got cruise control. Tiger 800 XCA or XRT, the 19-inch or the 21-inch. You can get them with cruise at that price. Yeah. Tiger 850 Sport, you could get that. That's probably it's one of the newest bikes in there, I suppose. Got T-plane crank, bit vibey.
Yeah.
You could even, obviously the KTMs you mentioned, you could go for a V-Strom 1050. Does that count as a middleweight? It's getting a bit portly, but still there.
Yeah, do you know I had V-Strom 800 on my list, but that fell at the cruise control hurdle.
Yeah,
whereas
it does.
the 1050, did they start getting it at some point quite recently?
No, quite a while ago. They've had it for a few years. Yeah, the last couple of generations. Hang on. Anyway, you can definitely get one
with it, yeah.
the new retro flavoured version.
Oh, yeah, because there was some... It's not retro styling, but it's retro paint jobs on some of those 1050s, aren't there? There was the kind of... when they kind of like doing pseudo fag colours, there was like a camel coloured one and like a Marlborough coloured one.
A little bit. It was more of a nod to Suzuki's old colours of the past, which were probably fag related, I guess. Yeah.
And I bet... I'm sort of trying to do a quick brain dive, but I bet they're not much heavier, if at all heavier, than a V85 TT, because that bike is sort of a middleweight in capacity terms.
It's quite compact.
Yeah, but it's quite dense with it. It's made out of something quite heavy.
It's true. That is true. Yeah.
They're all good suggestions, but V85 TT sounds like it's the perfect fit. You like the retro thing, like the air-cooled thing.
Oh, yeah, of course, he's got his retro thing as well, hasn't he? With this,
I like that.
All right, I'll go with that, although I think there are a few other options, but V85, unless you are a little bit more of a funky rider, in which case I'd go for probably the Tiger 800. Because that's a middle way, isn't it, between the funk of the Norden and the good looks of the V85. It hasn't got it's not as good looking as either of them, but it has got cruise control. It will come with heated grips if you get the XCA and full boxes.
That is true.
There you go.
Thank you, Rob. See you up in Scotland.
Indeed.
Mike Aitken says, "Hi, both. Listening to you pair saying that you don't use the vanishing point anymore." This was, this was your conversation in the last FEC about sort of suddenly remembering riding techniques halfway through a ride and going, oh yeah, I need to do that.
Well, yeah, sometimes it sort of pops into your head. You don't use it all the time. It's a you sort of consciously go, oh right, use the vanishing point. Anyway,
right. Mike says it made him smile because you're both still using it. Trust me. Before anyone mentioned it, you'd have been operating in the zone of unconscious incompetence. Unconscious incompetence. Interesting. After that, you're working in the region... Oh, I see. Before you'd learned about it, right, I'm with you. After, you're working in the region of conscious competence, and you're learning how it works to a high level. And then after that, you drift into unconscious competence, where your brain is doing very complex processing without having to think about the details, and it becomes what we call muscle memory. Have a read about conscious competence learning model if you want to know more.
Ooh,
consciously competent. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said about my riding.
Thank you, Mike. I think what he's talking about I think it's the zone, isn't it? It's when you're operating, where your brain is basically operating at a level that's unconscious, but it's doing a very complex task. But because it's so routine and so ingrained, it becomes, and then you can kind of float above it. We've talked about it quite a lot. But Mike, I will take issue with you because when I say I'm not always using the vanish point, it's literally because I'm not. Because most of the time I'm riding on roads that I know. So it's not necessary for me to work out the corner radius because I already know it. Why would I waste processing space reading a road that I already know? I'm looking for shit that might hurt me instead, like the variables, like road condition, stuff that gets in the way. But the radius is a constant. So I'm kind of pretty sure that most of the time, when I'm riding on unknown roads, granted I am using it, sometimes consciously, probably most of the time unconsciously, but I do know that I do it. I also know when I don't do it. It's when I know where I'm going. I'm very familiar with the unconscious competence in riding, because I bang on a lot about recognising the conditions that drop you from unconscious competence to conscious competence, because that's the bit where you come out of the zone, and that what things disturb the flow. So you drop out of the zone and then suddenly everything becomes mechanical rather than becoming autonomous or automatic. You have to start thinking about stuff, and that can affect your riding performance and your riding safety. And so it's really important, I think, to recognise those two sort of conditions of mind when you're riding. Because again, in terms of your behaviour and your personality, if you're the kind of person who is, and I think this is about being honest with yourself and recognising the kind of person that you are. But if you are the kind of person who becomes overwhelmed in a stress situation, so you'll recognise this in yourself if what I'm saying rings true to you, because it does ring true to me. So when I get faced with an awful lot of choices very quickly, a lot of information flooding in, I do tend to get sort of process paralysis. My CPU can lock up quite quickly. But I think. Now, that doesn't sound intuitive like that's a good thing for a motorcyclist at high speed, but I actually think it is, because what you do become very good at then is kind of working out the bits of information that are really important when you're riding a bike. And so you have this torrent of information coming in. You get very good at filtering out the stuff that's not important. And I think... so if you do respond badly in stressful situations when there's a lot of information, you can be a good motorcyclist.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because you're practiced at dealing with that situation. But anyway, Mike, thank you very much. Do you know what? What Mike's email is like that sketch when someone says, I'm going to hypnotise you, and you won't remember. The joke is actually homophobic, but let's say you won't remember, you just admitted that you voted for Brexit. And you say, well, I never voted for Brexit. And then the other guy says, well, the hypnosis worked then.
Hey.
You go, yeah, but I never voted for Brexit. It's a bit like that. Anyway.
I think Mike is being very flattering about his understanding of our riding. I think he's forgotten the fourth one. We've gone through unconscious incompetence and unconscious competence and conscious competence. I think you've forgotten. You've not given us enough credit for inhabiting the world of conscious incompetence. Where we know we're shit.
There are things you know, there are things you don't know, and then there are things that you know you don't know. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Mike.
Marcus Ransom. It's my turn, is it?
Sure.
Is it?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, right then. Marcus says, I have become an avid FEC listener after discovering the podcast about 18 months ago and listening to every podcast I could find from the start of the series. That's the third person who said that. That's a few hours of listening, as you would appreciate, having created all that content. Trust me, we know. We know. I've been riding since I was 16 years old. I'm 51 now, encouraged by my father, who rebuilt motorcycles as a hobby. We're talking Velocet, Matchless, AJS, NSU, Triumph, Ariel, BSA, and even a Jawa. My God, there's a list. My first proper bike was a Matchless G12 CSR 650cc parallel twin, funny enough, with a sidecar, which I was able to ride on L plates, which never seemed to go far before it needed some form of repair.
Oh, it's just like the old Triumph Sprint RS, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yeah. Out of interest, I've owned a whole variety of machines, from an FJ 650 RJ, a Seca, I remember them, to a Honda VFR 750, Kawasaki 440, and then a long list of bikes. But Marcus goes on to say, my passion has become Moto Guzzies, and I've had 3 of these, including an 1100 Grezzo, which I so regret selling, a 1200 Sport, written off after unexpectedly encountering a huge pothole on a country road.
That's a hell of a pothole to write a bike off. Wow.
Especially a 1200 Sport, because it takes a lot to stop them.
How was the pothole afterwards?
And a V85 TT Travel, which reignited a passion for riding. Although I cannot put my finger on why I love riding it. I just love looking at it so much. Well, there you go, Marcus.
There you go.
You should have a word with, was it Rob? Yeah. I noticed actually in that list, Marcus, you mentioned a Bulldog.
Oh, I remember them.
The Yamaha Bulldog. It was you who bought one, because nobody else did.
Yeah, I never rode one. I've seen... Yeah, I remember seeing them in the flesh, and they're kind of like an MT-01 light, aren't they?
That was it, yeah. I think we mentioned it last one when we talked about the MT-01. Yeah. Funny enough, it sent me down a little bulldog rabbit hole.
A bulldog hole?
Yeah, bulldog hole. There are 4 bulldogs for sale on Auto Trader, all between 3 and 3.5 grand, all over 20,000 miles. And that is mental. Because if you bought one now for 3.5 grand, you really need your head looking at.
3.5 grand?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say like 1,500 quid.
Yeah. No.
Wow.
Somebody, I looked up MCN's review, and I don't know who wrote it, but they're spot on. They put, owners love Yamaha BT 1100 Bulldogs. Everyone else hates them. Very good.
Yeah.
Anyway, Marcus goes on to say, finally, the question. I've noticed since using a separate sat-nav on my bikes that there is a significant difference in the velocity indicated by the speedos and that calculated by the sat-nav. This has been the case on several machines. Some appear to be accurate. I assume that the sat-nav is likely to be more accurate as it is doing a time versus distance calculation where the speedometer is effectively estimating velocity from wheel revolutions, although the point in the drivetrain where it does may vary. Several of my machines running stock setups have been very close to 10% out and always overestimate the speed, i.e. 64 miles an hour is shown as true speed is shown as 70 miles an hour. Do you know why this is the case? And am I correct in assuming that the sat-nav is more accurate? Legally, which should be used versus speed limits and restrictions? Does this also mean that my machines have actually only covered 90% of their indicated mileage?
Oh, yes.
Well, Marcus, I would like to direct you to UN Regulation number 39, Section 5, Paragraph 3.
Oh, direct me away.
This is uniform provisions concerning the approval of vehicles with regard to the speedometer and odometer equipment, including its installation. 5.3 says the speed indicated shall not be less than the true speed of the vehicle. At the test speed specified in paragraph 535 above, there shall be the following relationship between the speed displayed, V1, and the true speed, V2. And that's the bit where I switch off because then it turns into maths, and that's not my area of expertise. But I think, have you got this written down as well?
Something to that effect, yeah.
0 is equal to or less than the speedo speed minus the true speed, which must be equal to or less than 0.1 of the true speed plus 4 kph. Something like that.
That makes sense. In plain English, we'd say 10% plus a bit.
Please, thank you.
So, yeah, legally, it is written into European regulations that your speedo cannot underread but can overread by up to 10% plus a bit. I think that what that bit is depends on exactly which class of vehicle it is. In some cases, it's 3 miles an hour, 5 miles an hour, 7 miles an hour, whatever it is. But to be doing 64 true and for your speedo to be showing 70 is perfectly well within those regulations. So that is allowed.
Which I'm guessing is, I mean, in my sort of crap brain, I think that's because so you can't use it as a defence in court. You're never going to be able to say, well, my speedo was wrong and it be wrong in the wrong direction. But is there another reason, do you know of?
Well, I guess what would there be? Like a kind of basic mechanical tolerance, right? Because let's say your speedo is running off of a front wheel or a rear wheel, I don't suppose it matters. Your tyre is going to change shape and change circumference over time. So you've kind of got to build in a level of bodge. It's effectively a bodge factor, right? And so the manufacturers have to stick to these regulations. And what they're saying is you can never, ever get away with underreading on a speedo for obvious legal reasons. You can't ever use that as a defence. But yes, you can overread by up to a bit because at the worst case scenario, you'll end up riding slightly slower than the maximum speed limit. And that accounts for all of those, I guess, various things that might bend or flex or change, or you fit a different tyre size or whatever else.
Yeah.
So which one should you stick to legally?
That's the good question.
And that is a good question. I would like to start off by saying neither me nor Sight are lawyers, and so anything we say on this podcast cannot be taken or used as legal evidence. But your sat-nav should be showing a more accurate speed. I don't know of any European regulations that determine how accurate the display on your sat-nav has to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't Google that.
No. So in theory, your sat-nav has the far greater ability to be more accurate. But if you're doing 70 and the policeman pulls you over and says his laser gun said you were doing more than that, I don't know that you could necessarily use, well, my sat-nav said so, as a defence. I don't know.
I don't know either. What I do know, as usual, is anecdotal.
Yeah, okay. We'll go with a bit of anecdotal.
Which is that when you get nicked at doing 92 on the M6, I'm very well aware that my speedo was reading considerably higher than that.
Fair enough. I'm not sure that's a defence. What was his sat nav saying?
I can't remember. It was 100 or something.
96.
It was about 100 or something. Right. And also, you know, I regularly ride through Gatsos that are, say you're on, there's a whole stretch of them down the new bit of the A14 link road, links the A1 to the M1, yeah. And they're not average speed cameras. And so you'll see everybody in the traffic routinely rolling off to go past the cameras because they're on your Google Maps or your Waze or whatever. And you can generally go through them. I've set one off and I was doing I think I was probably doing 78 sat-nav speed and it went off. If you go through at 75, it doesn't. Now, again, this is not to be taken as advice. This is not suggesting you do that. Yeah. I'm simply telling you my experience of riding through most speed cameras on motorways in urban situations in 30s and 40s. Do 30 and 40. Don't go through a 30 at 34 on your GPS thinking you'll be all right because your clocks will be reading 40 and you'll get nicked. It will flash you. But there we go. Excellent. Thank you, Marcus. I hope we sort of answered some of that.
I hope so.
Cool. Shall we fast forward?
Oh, please.
Shall we nip over to Russ Ryan?
Do I have Russ Ryan?
You go on. While you're doing it, I'll read it out then.
Please.
So Russ Ryan says, stupid thing that puts me off the Daytona 660.
Now this was a follow-on from a theme about, listener said... Was it a listener or was it you? I can't remember now. Somebody pointed out the thing they really hate about the Triumph Tiger Sport 800. Was the 800 graphics on the tank.
No, it was a listener and I was agreeing.
Oh, you were agreeing. That was it. And I was like, I can't believe you'd let something that trivial put you off from buying what otherwise might be a really good bike.
Yeah.
And so this is Russ's little thing about a really good bike that puts him off.
Very simple, says Russ. In any other colour than black, they totally forgot to paint the rear of the bike.
Oh.
Could not ever buy one without immediately getting it wrapped. Bought a CBR 650R in GP red instead. Russ.
Hang on.
Love the podcast.
Google's picture, Triumph Daytona. I mean, I've ridden this thing and I didn't even...
Yeah.
And what does it say at the back of the bike? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it is.
It's black.
It is. I'll tell you what, I bet that makes production a lot easier.
It probably does, but for a company that's famed for some amazing paint colours, they are deathly dull.
They are. There's a white one and a red one and a grey one.
Yeah, red's doing it an awful disservice there. You're really overselling the redness of it.
Do you think? What would you call it?
Oh, I don't know. I'd call it sort of mud red or something. Yeah.
It looks sort of like the colour of Britain's roads at the minute.
It's very russet, isn't it?
Oh, goodness.
That's being generous.
Yeah, where's your yellow? Where's your bold? Where's your bright green? Where's your roulette pink?
It's supposed to be a sporty little thing. Yeah. I mean, look, Russ, you lost a customer in Russ. He went off and bought a Honda instead of buying a Triumph.
Which, has to be said, a Honda CBR 650R in its GP red. It's a good-looking thing.
It's a good-looking thing. It's bright, bold, colourful. It's what you want from that kind of bike. I can understand it if you're an NT 1100. Fair enough. I mean, even between you and me,
here we go.
Even Honda employees say, yeah, it's pretty dull.
We do 3 interesting colours, grey, midnight grey and dark grey.
Okay, there is a sticker kit available for it if you want.
It's a grey sticker kit.
You can put rim tape.
You can also have some grey rim tape on the grey wheels.
Shall we finish off with Drew Mutton Chops,
all right.
a.k.a. Andrew McKellar?
Sure. Drew/Andrew says, hello, Eric and Ernie. Thanks for the podcast. I've been listening for years and loved everyone. Goodness, even I didn't love everyone. I have a question about CF Moto. They are starting to make bikes that are gathering interest in the UK. The 450 MT, the 450 SR and the 675 SR. But, as I understand it, KTM acts as the European and UK importer and distributor. Is this right? 6 months ago, this looked like a great move for CF Moto, but with KTM's woes, will promoting a Chinese partner be top of their agenda? Are CF in danger of fluffing an opportunity to crack the European market if they stay tethered to KTM? What prompted this question is the CF Moto 500 SR Voom. Voom? Flippin' heck, I've seen some rubbish names in my life, but Voom. Anyway, Andrew says, it looks bloody brilliant. Have you seen it? It's a 500cc inline 4 with a 12,500 RPM red line. 80s retro styling and twin headlights. Is it coming to the UK? And also, given the name is uppercase, are you obliged to shout Voom everywhere? And send us a link. Right, CF Moto and the Voom.
Do you want to do the Voom first?
The Voom's interesting. I hadn't seen it, but I did follow the link, and it is a sort of a handsome-looking thing if you're an old person with fond memories of 40-something years ago.
Well, it's a bit of a mashup. It's a weird-looking thing. I mean, it is good-looking. It's got wings, which nothing 40 years ago had wings.
Yeah.
But it has got these strange kind of like circular ducts right in the nose of the fairing, which I'm guessing there's some kind of induction duct or cooling duct or fake cooling duct.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's not circular headlights because there is a little headlight under it. And it is a sports bike. It's very sporty. Should have made that clear. It's quite, full fairing. It has sort of like under-seat pipes, one on either side that look a bit Monster S2R-ish.
Yeah, a little bit.
That kind of thing.
It's kind of like a mini XSR 900 GP in that it's kind of sporty and retro and 80s. What I just find funny, though, is that CF Moto weren't around building bikes like that in the 80s. So they're just totally cobbing off of someone else's heritage.
They are. But unfortunately, it's not coming to the UK.
Is it not?
We have a quote that says from KTM themselves saying, nope, no 500 SR for us, I'm afraid. Not for the UK and possibly not even for Europe. But the 675 will have an official launch or an announcement of a launch in the next couple of months. So more to come then.
Ooh. Yeah, CF are an interesting company. I think we said before, I first rode one in 2012 when it was called something else, and they were pretty horrible back then. But in recent years, they have, massively up their game. And the 450 MT is a really startling little thing. I think it'll be interesting to know what these 675 triples are like. It's also interesting that they make bikes for other markets that are not coming to Europe for various reasons. Now, what those reasons might be, we can only speculate. It could be an emissions thing, i.e. they can't get the engine through Euro 5+. It could be a demand thing. It could be a pricing thing. It could be a whatever else. I don't know. It could be that it doesn't quite fit in with the demographic of European riders in that it's a 500, which we typically would consider quite a new bike, but it's not A2 compliant as standard. So maybe it just doesn't fit in with those things. But bigger than all of that is that this is the first time I've put two and two together and realised that... Do you remember how, in the olden days, we used to look at the bikes that were on sale in Japan, small capacity bikes that were on sale in Japan, and be wooed by the allure of the forbidden fruit, right? The bikes that the manufacturers wouldn't bring into the UK officially, and we go, oh, have you seen what they do over there? They do a 250cc 19-cylinder V whatever, and it's got 1 horsepower, 1 million RPM.
I still look at old vintage pics of grey imports and think, oh, look at that. Why did we never get one of those?
And so then you have businesses set up with a single focus in getting hold of used examples or barely used examples and shipping them over so that we could kind of buy them and skirt around the official importers. This is the first time I've heard someone say, you know where I'm looking overseas for my forbidden fruit now? China. And it's true. The Chinese brands, there are so many more Chinese brands than we as European riders are aware of. And their bikes that they build, the range of bikes that they build is so much broader and deeper and wider and more interesting than we have any understanding of, because probably our initial experience of Chinese bikes was pretty ropey, if we're being generous at best.
Yeah.
And I don't think we appreciate how much things have changed in a tiny amount of time. You can go and look at, for example, QJ Moto, a company that probably if you grabbed 100 motorcyclists and asked them to name every Chinese brand under the planet would struggle to name. And they have a range of 4-cylinder bikes right now, including, I'm guessing that these are real and not just made up on the website, but an SRK 600, a 600cc inline 4, SRK 800RR, a 778cc inline 4, which I think is currently being raced in World Supersport. The SRK 921RR, a 921cc inline 4. The SRK 1000RR, which is confusingly is also a 921cc inline 4. But that has 160 horse and a single swing arm. And an SU9, which looks suspiciously like an MV Agusta Super Veloce. Or you can go and look at the Bender, Benda, Dark Flag 500, which is a 496cc V4.
Wow.
In a cruiser.
Wow.
There are loads of interesting things in terms of the bikes that the Chinese manufacturers are building, and I don't quite know whether they've got more money to burn on R&D. I don't know whether they're different, maybe environmental regulations gives them more freedom to build more stuff. I mean, they're not copying. When was the last time you heard of a 496cc V4?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do when we finish this podcast is go and open up YouTube and see if anybody in China has tested one or in the Far East. Because I've got half suspicion they don't exist.
Maybe they don't.
It's possible.
But, even that's a suspicion
The other difference between them and the grey imports of old is that when you bought a grey import into this country from, you bought one from a dealer, even if that model wasn't supported, the parts for it were available because a lot of stuff was common to other bikes like 600s or whatever. You're taking a bit of a leap of faith if you get a Voom and shove it in you can be wooed by the Voom as much as you like.
Yeah, there is that.
Get it in a crate and bring it over here. You're on your own, mate.
That kind of brings us back to the original question about the benefit of CF having a kind of European importer and distributor. Because it's not just getting hold of the bikes, it's also having the kind of warranty and the sales support and the spares support and the whatever else. So what if, is CF going to be KTM's biggest priority? No, clearly it isn't. Clearly KTM have got other things on their plate to be dealing with at the minute, including getting their production lines running again, getting back staff and customer confidence, selling the 100,000 plus bikes that they've got sitting in warehouses. Yeah. And, in the grand scheme of things, I think Pierra's role in CF is the distributors for... it's not all of Europe, but it's maybe Britain and Germany and Austria and Spain and somewhere else maybe. It's certain markets. Is that going to be their biggest thing? Probably not. But does that mean that CF and Pierra need to kind of go separate ways? I don't know.
I don't know. I suspect it might be the other way around because I think we're in danger of sort of mistaking the minnow for the shark here.
Yeah, quite.
Because I think, CF Moto has been touted as one of the
potential investors
to bail KTM out, and that they ain't going to do that for free.
No,
effectively,
they're not, for sure.
So they may well end up having a larger stake in KTM and having a bit more of a say and having a bit more control over.
I'll tell you what. If I was CF and if I was going to put a load of money into Pierra, I'll tell you the first thing I'd tell them: stop importing 790s and maybe even 890s into Europe. Because they're competitors for my CF product.
Yeah, yeah.
So you carry on with your 12 or your 1390s, whatever, for now. And we'll have a talk about that in the future. But what I'd like to use you as is my vehicle to get a load of 450s, 675s and 890s into the country.
So possible. Yeah.
I think things are going to change.
Anyway, Drew,
things are going to change. We'll all be on benders this time next year.
Yeah, I certainly will be. Don't know about you. Thank you, Drew. That was a good email. There's some more stuff that you finished off the email with some. You've ended up with an.
Oh yes, sorry, I've missed out. I forgot.
Well, that's okay.
Got stuck on my V4. What else does Drew say? He says Simon mentioned a few episodes ago about the hope for a Ducati Supersport V4. Drew says he had a Supersport 937 but couldn't gel with it despite it being an objectively great bike. What he wanted was a Supersport V4. And his local Ducati dealer offered him a ride on a 1-year-old Aprilia Tuono V4. After a year of trying to love the Ducati, I swapped. What a bike! Genuinely comfortable all day, decent weather protection. Goodness. Cruise control, and with some Hepco luggage, a true sports tourer. The only downside is its unbelievable thirst. It's almost comical how fast the fuel gauge budges. No matter how I ride, it barely scrapes 120 miles. It's the second correspondence this week to say that the bike doesn't go more than 120 miles. It's almost as if range maybe isn't that much of a barrier to motorcycle adoption. It feels pretty solid, but I wouldn't have bought one, says Drew, without a factory warranty and a good local dealer. Well, again, that brings us back down to the importance of a distributor and proper dealer network.
It does indeed.
You ever ridden one of these newfangled Tuono V4s, Si?
Yeah.
Because I rode a lot of the old V-twins and V4s, but they a couple of years ago, they sort of turned it into, they chilled out a bit, didn't they?
They did. I think the last time I rode one was around about the same time you did, probably. We did a launch of the first 1100, didn't we?
Jeez, we did, yes.
Sorry to remind you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I rode one that year as well for MCN, but I think that was about it. I don't think I've ridden one. I do keep looking at them because they do look kind of exactly like Drew says, they kind of look like a modern equivalent of a Phase 1000, which is right up my alley, except with cruise control and some other nice things on it. But yeah, the tank range. Oh, No way. Couldn't live with that. Not
You couldn't.
Me. No,
120 miles not enough for you.
No, it's not. And 1 hour and 20 minutes is enough for me as well.
Perfect.
Perfect.
So, before we get into your carefully timed and orchestrated finale, let's do all the thank yous and the useful stuff now. Firstly, if you want to join us on FEC Fling 2 later in May, you need to go to bit.ly/FECFling2.
Well done.
That's on the MCI Tours booking website. If you want to get your bike insurance, you should go to bennetts.co.uk. If you want to find out what's going on in motorcycling, you should go to bikesocial.co.uk. Do you want to press the button?
Yeah, I was going to say, unless you've got a minute's worth of material here, we're going
I mean, I could pad it out. If you want to find out more about the Suzuki e-address, you can always email me and I'll give you lots of interesting insight into LFP batteries and whatever else. There we go. There's the music. He, Simon Hargreaves, is available on some of the social medias. Now, you have different handle on Insta than on Blue Sky, don't you?
Oh, Christ, you're asking me? I don't know.
Aren't you at Simon H Bikes or at Cy with some bikes, at Cy Bikes?
I've got no idea.
Brilliant.
Don't even know.
I'm what I don't know, at Mufka.
At Mufka, yes.
We've done Bennetts, we've done Thing. Go and sign the petition, bit.ly/ oh God, I've forgotten it already. How long have I got? 33 seconds. I can do that. Paul Varsry's petition, bit.ly/stopbadkit. For a UK citizen, it will take you 2 minutes. It will cost you nothing. It might save motorcycling.
And unless you've already done this and I wasn't listening, don't forget to send your questions, queries, rants, objections, and advice on how to save Western civilization to anything@frontendchatter.com.
And it does have to be anything. Not just anything, but anything at frontendchatter.com.
Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Have a lovely 2025. Oh, no, we're going to do this again, aren't we? Nailed it!
That should have been perfect. We have the technology. Is my alarm going off now? Probably, isn't it? Yeah.
What's that alarm for? Don't do FEC. Finish FEC.
Screw the ending up.